I'm a LEGO animator, and in this video I'm animating some of the most satisfying and stretchiest LEGO animations you've ever seen. This time I'm pushing it to the limit with brand new ways to stretch LEGO. I'll be stretching all kinds of things, from minifigures to trees, Minecraft pigs, and I'll even try to stretch this gigantic brick-built LEGO minifigure. Let's begin animating. I have done plenty of stretching animations before, but I wanted to dedicate a whole video just for stretching LEGO. So first, let's do the basics. Like, how do you even animate LEGO stretching? As we all know, LEGO bricks are very rigid and not stretchable at all. But we can fake it with the art of stop motion animation by adding pieces between frames. When we play back the animation, it looks like the piece gets stretched. And that's the technique I'll be using throughout this video. And if I add hands to the animation, it looks even more real. I can even make it look like a yo-yo. And it gets even better when we start doing it with minifigures. We just do the same thing as with the brick, adding pieces in between the torso and legs of the figure to make it look stretched. The stretched figures look very silly. And the animations themselves don't end up looking bad either. Later on, I'll even try to animate this massive brick-built minifigure in the same way. But first, let's make it more interesting. We can make stretched figures that are bent by doing this illegal building technique where you don't fully click down the bricks on one side like this. For the animation, you do need some insane patience, as the build will fall apart several times before you're done. At least the animation looks very nice. We can also stretch it sideways by building the figure sideways instead of upward. Since the torso doesn't fit in the build, we need to find a way to attach the arms. And the arms don't fit in any other holes other than the torso piece, so I'll have to use an impossible building technique. I put some sticky tack inside of these Technic bricks, which then hold the arms in place. Now with the figure stretched to the side, we can at the same time stretch it upwards to make a huge figure. We'll see these used in other animations in just a moment. Anyway, now that we know the basics, we can start making some fun, satisfying stretching animations. Recently I saw this GIF, which mimics something called mitosis, which is when cells divide and multiply, but that's not important. I like the look of it, so I want to recreate it and make this minifigure multiply. And I'm gonna use the stretching effect to make it look like it does so, but stretching it sideways and then splitting. I started stretching it by adding some tiles to the side of the figure and popping off the arms like it's getting fatter. I then built this 4 bricks wide body before I switched it with 2 minifigures. When played back, it looks pretty good. And by returning the figure to its starting point, I can loop the animation and infinitely generate minifigures. And now I have a whole pile of them. Next, I want to animate bungee jumping, since I feel like I can do some fun stuff with stretching. I needed a background for the animation, so I started by making a river using these tiles, which work perfectly as LEGO water. I then built this green valley around and added these supports for the bridge. Now the idea is that the minifigure will stretch down as if it was the bungee rope itself and pull some items out of the water, like a fish or a duck as it's looking for a chest full of treasures in the river. To hold the figure upside down, I built this contraption. It also made it very easy to change the length of the stretch as I was animating. Now I decided to mix it up a little by using my hand to assist the figure stretch down, as I think it'll look better. To make it look like the figure is underwater, I switch out the top of the figure with this flat tile and have it flush underwater. And I'll use some of these clear studs to make splashes and waves. Now for the treasure chest. I want all the treasures to fall out in a comedic way when the figure pulls it out of the water. And this ended up taking a really long time to animate, since I had to animate each of the gems and gold bars fall down separately. They were held up with these supports, which I then had to edit away. You have no idea how long it took. Anyway, the results ended up looking great. I wanted to do something else sports related, and my mind went straight to the goalkeeper in football. I can make some fun animations where the goalkeeper stretches in all kinds of directions to stop the ball. First I had to make the goal, but I didn't have any good LEGO nets for it, so I found this random non-LEGO net and cut it to the perfect size. Then I got a bunch of these 1x1 cylinder pieces and used some of these suspicious looking pieces to connect the frames. With the goal done, I built the surroundings, using white tiles as painted markers on the ground, and then added a hedge in the back with a fence. And as you can see, it isn't very wide, but that's no problem since it won't be visible on the finished video when viewed on a phone. Now let's get started on the animation. I'm gonna have 4 different stretches, which are the ones I showed you in the intro. We're talking straight up, sideways, bent, and finally one that blocks the entire goal where the ball doesn't even fit through this little gap. This might be considered cheating at the sport, but I don't think there's a rule against this. This animation ended up being one of the most intricate ones I've ever done, with a total of 3 cameras being used making it. We have the main camera, which will take pictures for the animation, and this other one is something called a witness camera, which lets me see the animation from a different point of view. The third camera is this iPhone, which is also a witness camera, but this is looking down from the top. I made this very risky setup using extra lights to balance this beam going over to hold my iPhone. And this is all because I need to make sure I animate the ball flying in a specific line. And to do that, I have these cameras connected to a software where I control a line as a guide, which I can then see live to make sure the ball is in the right spot in all 3 dimensions. This camera is off to the side, so I can make sure the ball is at the right height, while the top-down camera is to make sure it is in the right spot on the field. So while I was animating, I was switching between different camera views, making sure everything was right. And usually when I animate stuff flying, I use this transparent stick to hold it up and then edit the stick out later. But this time I needed more control of the position of the ball, so I started looking for alternatives, but instead of buying expensive metal rigs often used by professionals, I instead looked at how they functioned and built one out of Lego. With this, I'm able to easily make tiny adjustments to the position of the ball, rotate this to make the ball go up or down, and just slide it back and forth to move the ball to the sides. Very useful, and I will definitely be using this more in the future, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. With the rig and the extra cameras, I had everything I needed to animate the ball, follow the guides, and finish the animation. For the next animation, I'm doing another sport that stretching will work really well with, basketball. Since you need to be pretty tall, I can make an animation where I stretch a minifigure to give it an advantage at the sport. Imagine being able to just grow tall and score with ease. First, I had to build a basketball goal, and I didn't have this basketball net piece, so for the hoop, I used this life ring floaty piece, and the pole I made really tall to make it a real challenge to score. Surprisingly, I also didn't have a Lego basketball, so I got creative and ended up using this Lego pumpkin piece instead. It has similar looking stripes as basketballs, and from far away, I think it could be easily mistaken for one. And the toughest part of the animation was making the figure stretch to the side, as this figure was way taller than the previous ones. So stretching it and bending it backwards like this was just not possible. It kept falling apart when I tried to do so. So I had to have the figure stand sideways and bend it to the side. That way it would stay together most of the time. Once fully stretched, I then animated it swinging towards the hoop and scoring. The ball obviously can't fit through the hoop, but with animation we can make it look like it goes through by just moving it from the top to the bottom of the hoop between frames. This way it looks like it goes through when animated. I then made sure everything returned to the starting position so that the animation looped. Here's the finished animation. And I think that's enough sports, so let's move on. Planting trees is good for the planet, but I don't want to sit around and wait for them to grow for years. So this next animation is gonna fix that. I want to plant a Lego tree seed and then grab it and stretch it out of the ground to make it instantly grow. It's a fun idea for an animation, and I'm using this 1x1 stud to represent the seed. Now I need to build a tree that will grow. I'm using a few of these brown cylinder pieces, and unfortunately one of them broke during the animation. Rest in peace, part 3062. A small sacrifice for satisfying animation. Anyway, now the leaves. I didn't just want to stick one of these big leaf pieces on top. It looks very ugly, and from the side you can't even see most of it. It just looks like a massive T. So I got this grass piece which will sit at the top of the tree as a foundation for the leaves. I built 3 of these leaf segments and stuck them on the grass piece, but like that they'll fall off. I have to use this flower piece which fits the bars on the grass piece to make sure the leaves stick. Animating the leaves grow was very satisfying, and to finish the animation I'll axe down the tree for infinite wood supply. Turned out pretty well, I think. I saw this picture of a cursed Lego Minecraft pig, and it gave me the idea to animate it. So I searched my collection for a Minecraft pig and got to work. I set up a simple Minecraft themed baseplate for the background, and I didn't have a lot of these pink pieces, but I had just enough to make the pig somewhat tall. It looks really cursed. Now let's animate it. First, I tried by just stretching the top part. Then I did just the legs, and both ended up looking like something straight out of a Looney Tunes clip. I then did the one where I stretched everything. Next, I want to take this to a different direction, and I mean that literally. I'm not gonna stretch a pig up, but instead make it longer. We'll need more space, so I brought in a bigger base plate. I got a bunch of pink plates instead of bricks to build a long pig, and then animated it being stretched. The animation ended up looking awesome. Also, this pig is bendier than the new iPhone. And actually, all of this reminds me of a stretching animation I did before, where I stretched a Lego car into a literal stretched limousine. Now, what happens if you combine the limo idea with a minifigure? Well, we get this monstrosity. I have stretched minifigures up and sideways, but never this way, whatever you would call this way. It looks like a really fat minifigure, and to animate this, I have to animate it looking at it from the side. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to tell how long it is. To get started, I built a bunch of these pre-made builds, and for each frame I would just swap the head and arms. This way I wouldn't have to rebuild the entire stretch body every time I would modify its length. As you can see, both my hands are in the animation itself, so I can't press the remote to take pictures. To get around this, I use my foot to press the remote instead. Also, just for fun, if we add wheels to the stretch figure, it becomes a minifigure stretch limo. Anyway, check out the finished animation. This animation gave me another idea, as this stretch kinda reminds me of a technique I have used to make minifigures appear super fast in animations by adding these speed smears behind them. So I modified the stretches so that if I pull from the back of the figure and then release it like one of those wind-up car toys, I can animate the figure take off really quickly. Also, is it just me or does this kinda look like a slug now? Anyway, I also built this with these speed lines in the back for when the figure speeds off. When I was done animating, I did some editing to fix the arms, since the stretch build has them a bit lower than a normal minifigure, so the animation looked a bit jarring, but not anymore. At this point, I have done a lot of stretching animations using this minifigure, but what if the figure was bigger? And I mean a lot bigger. Well, LEGO has made a lot of these brick-built upscale LEGO minifigure sets, like this pirate, race car driver, some Harry Potter characters, and even Santa Claus. And by far my favorite, the upscaled classic Bob minifigure. The regular sized one is the star of many of my animations, so of course I got it. And I wanna try to stretch it just like the small figure, so let's build the set, which by the way has over 600 pieces and uses some really cool building techniques to get the shape of the figure right. At the height of more than 7 minifigures, I have to say it looks very nice. Anyway, once the set was fully built, I took it apart in the middle and got a whole bunch of red and blue bricks so I could begin stretching it. I prepared for the animation by building these pre-made sections for the stretched minifigure. I can just add one between each frame to make it look like the figure gets taller. I made small ones for the frames where I just want to stretch it a little bit, and these larger ones for the bigger stretches. And to make the sections easy to take apart, I made the top part partially out of tiles instead of plates, so that they didn't have too much clutch power. And I used sticky tank to keep the legs in place, otherwise they would move a little every time I adjusted the height. When the figure was fully stretched, I had to make sure the balance was right, or else this would happen. I ended up adding a support to the back to keep it from falling over. I set up the camera and noticed the face of the figure was in the shadow because of the hat, so I added an extra light underneath to light it up. With all of this done, I could start animating. Holding my arm up during the animation was very tiring, but luckily having the support in the back made it much easier to take quick breaks in between while not having to worry about holding up the figure, and the animation ended up only taking about an hour to make. This is the ultimate LEGO stretching animation. I hope you liked that and the other animations in this video. If you did, you should click here and check out my other satisfying animation videos. I've done many stretching animations in them before, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. Anyway, thanks for watching.